Today on the show, I'm happy to have Cory Hewett. He's the founder of a startup in electrification, but he also holds 3 patents and a variety of copyrights on several technologies. So, Cory, to date, how much revenue have your products generated?
Comfortably over 10 million in total revenue.
So, would you say you're a serial inventor?
I guess so, with 3 patents and a menagerie of copyrights, one of which we had to defend in federal court and won. I'd say yeah.
So, with creating an invention, what's your process on taking an idea and actually deciding it's worth pursuing commercially?
For me, the biggest thing is customer success. Can we validate that people want and need whatever's going to be invented, whatever's going to be built?
And how do you go about figuring out that part?
So usually it's some kernel, some little problem that gets injected in life, and you're like, that shouldn't be there. For two of the businesses, or excuse me, of the 2 startups, for one of them, it had to do with my own experience running a vending operation. So when I was in high school, I bought my first vending machine, and then from there, I became aware that there were some issues with trying to keep track of how well it was doing, what was inside of it. So that became the impetus. But then we did over 100 customer discovery interviews with people who operated much bigger companies in order to figure out, do these problems scale? If you've got more money, do you have more problems, or do you have better solutions than the small guy has? And we discovered that they had solved most of the problems, but there became challenges keeping track of cash and inventory. And as you got bigger, those problems became bigger. And so that's that combination of direct, firsthand, personal experience exposed the problem to me. And then customer discovery demonstrated that it was a problem people were willing to solve and pay to solve.
How hands-on are you with actually getting the patent? Are you hiring an attorney to do it? Are you doing a lot of it yourself?
When we filed the very first provisional, we didn't have any money to hire great lawyers. Now, we did have a great lawyer who's willing to work with us, but he really used our labor to do most of the work for him. And so I'd say we did get lucky, connected with a great attorney. He helped us file, but it was a lot of work trying to produce the claims, trying to understand how we could defend this later if we had to, which became future telling because ultimately we did have to. So I remembered some of those arguments from before. Oh, this is why it's valuable. So sometimes, I've heard entrepreneurs talk about going really broad with their patents, so it's as comprehensive as possible. We actually went really narrow. We went very specific and focused. We knew that perhaps we were giving up a little bit around the edges, but we knew that we could defend this for sure. And that turned out to be a good call for us.
So what were the specifics of your 3 inventions? What did they end up doing out in the world?
There's this common port inside of grocery stores and vending machines. And when I say port, I mean old school data transaction interface. And it runs on something that looks like a guitar jack, but communicates like a telephone, but doesn't bring any power with it. Most things that we plug into have power. If you have a USB stick, you plug in and it provides power to do the transaction. But in this case, there is no power on the other side. So everybody was having to bring super bulky devices with them anytime they wanted to transact data. The 3 patents all had different flavors of, was it working in a grocery store? Was it working with a mobile device? Was it working at the vending machine? But if you boil it all down, the whole secret sauce was, how could we make something last for a really long time? Our design target was, could we make it last a decade without ever needing to be recharged or have the battery replaced? So could one little battery last for a decade and still communicate with any iPhone running or app, even if that iPhone and that device had never talked together before, without a user having to pair it using the settings menu? So that was the design constraint. Battery that would last a long time, that used nothing from the user and never had to be manually set up through the settings menu. And we were successful with that. And so the secret sauce that powered it is what the basis of a lot of those patent claims and copyrights came out to be. But basically allowed us to hack the Bluetooth Low Energy standard. When I say hack, I don't mean in an illegal capacity, just use it in a way that it wasn't designed, that the standard was not configured for, and allow people to achieve those goals.
So long-lasting batteries and technology have always been top of mind in your entrepreneurial journey. Is that?
Yeah, electrification has been a key part since the beginning, even with low voltage designs and tiny batteries, but now growing up into bigger batteries too and other types of powered systems.
So I know you've done a lot of speaking and research on electric vehicles and the materials required to keep them running. Would love to hear a little bit about that and what you're doing in that space.
When I exited startup number 2 last year, I had been paying attention to, I noticed that I had visited at the time every single electric charging station that also had a directly connected retail store to it. So I'd been going on this bit of a boondoggle to visit these stations. I had gone through 9 EVs personally. I'm on number 8, number 9 now. An electric Harley, a two-wheel, a motorcycle, as well as a Tesla Model Y. So paying attention to those things last year, I realized I'm seeing that this is where I'm spending a lot of my personal time and energy. And there's a little bit of a dad joke embedded in that one. But how can I become more helpful to other entrepreneurs in the space and to the industry as a whole? And it came down to material science that was going to be important. So minerals mining and recycling, as well as looking at the regulatory and finance environments, which we're really trying to promote not only what consumers are doing, aka here's a tax credit for buying the finished good, but how do we inspire more clean generation of required minerals? Yeah, that became interesting to me.
So, as far as the materials right now around EVs, what are some of the areas that you think are interesting?
It's taking a look for me. What's interesting about what's happening in the electrification transition is where do we get these things from? And that opens up a can of worms, which is what comes from the ground. And okay, how we get it out of the ground has a number of environmental concerns to it, but also where is that ground located? Is it located in a friendly territory or in competitive territory or a downright like enemy territory? And then how reliant are we becoming on these different sources in order to create this infrastructure? Because there might be 99, and that's in like a simplification, there might be 99,000, but if there's 100 pieces to your product and you can get 99 from friendlies, but one comes from an enemy and there is no direct substitute for that piece, then things like, oh, the boats can't travel in the same direction anymore becomes you can't build that thing anymore. And we saw a lot of that during COVID. It exposed how fragile parts of the supply chain could be. Even if you had 99% of things figured out, if that one critical piece got disrupted, then your entire ability to make products and run a business got disrupted. So I'm paying a lot of attention to the problem of how do we make sure that 100% of what we're getting has reliable sources, is being produced in a way that's not catastrophically bad or worse than what we're replacing. Those are the main considerations on my mind right now.
Are you creating a business around that?
I might be. Something unique happened for me. I'd consider myself, like you mentioned, maybe a serial entrepreneur, serial innovator. I've had 2 venture-backed companies so far. I did raise funds already, was successful raising funds for venture number 3. But along the way, I've been doing a ton of research, consuming a lot of content. People have been very generous with their time and with their knowledge to talk to me. So along the way, different groups have been paying to license some of the content and writing that I've produced. I've got about 100 pages worth of research that I've generated while I've gone deep into this. Over, I think at this point, over 200 one-on-one interviews with subject matter experts along the chain. I've kept those confidential to protect their anonymity, but I've distilled the learning and put that into my research. And so now I'm technically a journalist. I'm a senior writer, and I'm producing content related to the field. We mentioned startup, and the answer is yes, but if I'm very candid, I haven't done, I'm not done. I don't know exactly what we're going to build yet. And so when people see stealth mode startup on my LinkedIn profile, they're like, what's the secret? Can you tell us what you're building? I'm like, I honestly can't. I don't know what I intend to build yet. I'm still doing, it would almost be like discovery. I'm trying to practice what I preach, do the discovery. It's been about a year now. And like I said, I'm learning a lot and producing a lot of content to share what I've learned, but what I've found so far isn't sufficient for the business that I want to build next.
If our listeners wanted to follow you through this journey and learn more about what you're doing, how could they do so?
LinkedIn is my primary channel. So it's my name, right? LinkedIn.com/in/Cory Hewett, CoryHewett. And then I've got a great creative director who's joined my personal team. And so he's taking a lot of what I've learned, and we're sharing that as well on TikTok and Instagram.
Thank you, Cory, for coming on the show, and everybody for listening to another episode of Failing to Success. If you like the show, make sure to subscribe. I'm your host, Chad Kalecki, and we'll see you next time.